Dr. Tom Neal. How are you?
Dr. Chris O'Neill, I'm well. How are you?
Not quite doctor.
Oh yeah, you are a doctor, man. You have earned the right to be called that, lowercase
Okay.
d, but it's still what you
Little
are.
d. Okay, fine.
You
Very
are a
good.
teacher to the core, brother. That's what doctor
Thank
means. It
you.
just means teacher.
All right. Thank you. So for those of you guys who don't know, Tom Neal and I are longtime friends. We go way back. We've been together for a long time. Back when Tom was a lowly doctoral student.
That's right.
And I've been kind of in a similar orbit for a long time, and it's been just a huge privilege to be able to invite you to come and be part of the men's conference and to speak. I'm glad the schedule's finally worked out, and
so grateful.
And I really think that this particular conference, where we are in the history of the church in New Orleans, and this theme just suits you really well. You were definitely like, yeah, we should get Tom for this. So we're really glad to have you. So thanks for coming and being part of it.
It's a pleasure. And I want to mention that I actually met your wife before I met you when she was a college student. And I remember it very well. It was in the front offices at St. Thomas More, Co-Cathedral in Tallahassee, Florida. And she came into the front office there, she was just coming there for the first time to say, where's the student activities and all. Mm-hmm. I just happened to be there, and we had a little conversation, and then I met you later. So I don't know what year that would have been. What I met her. But anyway.
It would have been like 96 or something 96. Like that.
There you go.
Probably.
See, but at that time, I was a maintenance man there, so he's even lowlier. It was the least most stress-free job I've ever had in my life.
Especially since working in the church, right?
Exactly. With Mike Pearson. Anyway, great memories.
Yeah, really good memories. But most of the guys listening don't have those memories. So and you have some connection to New Orleans. People are excited that you're here, that you're coming back because you've been around. But let's just start with just a real quick overview. Who you are, what's your background, what's your connection to New Orleans, and and then we'll go on from there.
Sure. I'm thrilled. Again, thrilled. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this men's conference, and which I've been to in the past when I lived in New Orleans. I used to go to it each year. So I really love everything about what it represents. So to be part of it in this way is awesome. But yeah, so I'm originally from New England, went in the middle 80s, went to Florida State University to get my degree in meteorology. Long story short, I had a kind of life-altering experience of Christ, changed my life, kind of turned it upside down, inside out, and then redirected my life path, eventually leading me to getting my degree in theology, PhD in religion at Florida State University with a focus on the Catholic spiritual tradition in St. John of the Cross. And I've spent since really 1996 or so, when I started working in the church in a teaching ministry from 1996 to the present day, have been doing that ever since. Working in Tallahassee for a little while. I was down in the Tampa area. You and I both were down there for a little while there.
Yep.
A little stint there, and then went on, got my PhD. My wife, Patty, and I, who've been married now for 30 years, have 4 children and 1 grandson. Moved then to Iowa in 2008, where I got a job as head of a catechetical institute. After I'd finished my PhD, I couldn't find a job in the Tallahassee area where I lived that really would match my background. And so I applied all over the country and got a job there. And that was wonderful. 4 years there in Des Moines, Iowa. Really a blessing.
Really remarkable work there. What was going on in Des Moines? Yeah, really good.
Yeah, no, it was just it's a vibrant place to be in terms of the Catholic community there and the opportunities and working with the bishop. So it was a blessing. And then after 4 years there, Dr. Chris Baglow, who is well known in the New Orleans area, who at the time when I first met him in 2007, he was at Holy Cross College, then now university, as the head of the theology master's program. And I had interviewed in 2007 for a job there, and I didn't end up taking the job, but we became friends. So that was in 2007. So in 2011, he came to Des Moines at my request to give a lecture series on faith and science. And then we had dinner the last night, and he said, "Have I got a deal for you?" there is a job in New Orleans at the seminary there, spiritual theology position we need to fill, and you are the perfect man for it. I think you need to consider it. As a matter of fact, more than consider it, I've already convinced the Archbishop you're the man.
Yeah.
This only Chris Baglow could do. So he did. So I went down there and took a chance and interview with the Archbishop, and the Archbishop, extremely gracious, opened that opportunity for me. And Father Jose Lavastida, who was the rector at the time, I was hired to be a professor of spiritual theology. And I arrived and then quickly not only became a professor, but also was made the head of the lay institute that was being formed there, and the director, and asked to develop it and grow it with Susie Vetters and some other people. And then about almost less than a year after that, I was asked to be the academic dean. So I gave up all my teaching dreams to become the academic dean.
So we were around. I was, we kind of, our stories kind of part and come together. And I was coming around when you became dean, and when you had all of that administrative work to do. That's and all of that, you did it well, but it wasn't your thing. Yeah.
It's not my thing, but yes.
I remember those days. I remember those days really well.
And I appreciated the conversations we had too. You were very good at just listening to me as I, worked through my struggles. But anyway, so I served for 5 years as academic dean. Father Jim Wayner, who was the rector at the time, and, invited me to do that with the Archbishop. And it definitely stretched me. It took me in places I never wanted to go. But in the end, I was grateful because it made me develop my leadership skills and things that I would never have done before, without being really pushed to do them. So, and then I stepped down from that, and then I was teaching for a number of years. And then, long story short, the bishop of the diocese I'm in now, Pensacola-Tallahassee, Bishop Bill Walk, I did a retreat for the priests of the Diocese of Pensacola-Tallahassee in April of 2022. And at the end of that retreat, he said to me, if you ever want to consider coming back to this diocese, which is, he said, this is your home. This is your true home. You're welcome here, and I would love to have you here. So that kind of sat as a seed in me for a lengthy period of time there. And then eventually germinated in an actual offer he gave me to be able to be the chief, as I'm called, the chief. I didn't want to be called the chief, but that's what they called me, the chief. I always think of, anyway,
the marching
of the Beverly Hillbillies. Right. Yeah, that too. The chief, the Seminole chief. I think of the Beverly Hillbillies. Remember Mrs. Hathaway, chief. Yeah. Anyway, chief. So chief of evangelization and mission engagement, which is a very marvelously auspicious and frightening title for me to have, with the church's whole mission is really evangelization. It's like I say, it's not like a job description for someone. It's the meta mission of the entire church, is to proclaim the gospel and realize it in the world. But anyway, it's a privilege to be here and to work with this extraordinary team, the diocesan team, with the parishes, the schools, and it's just a vibrant place. You and I both love this diocese deeply. For so many reasons. Anyway, so I've been here now for almost 3 years in this position, and really, there's no doubt in my mind, my wife and I, that this was the decision.
Place we should,
for the hope, God willing, the final landing of the rest of the years of my career to serve here. So anyway, thanks for
well, and I imagine too, one of the things that I want to talk about, when we're talking about the vocation of the layperson, and this is a bit of a strange, vocation to be Very in strange. That you were in, but there is this, even that time when you were, academic dean and have to flex muscles that you just didn't really have, like learn how to do all of that administrative work and That's how right. to take care of all of that. It ends up paying dividends in the next where you are now, because, if you're doing mission engagement, you have to both be able to articulate the faith and teach the faith well, but you also have to be able to practically care for all of the structures and everything that need to happen to make That's that right. actually effective. A lot of people don't see the background administrative kind of work that's necessary to support, really fruitful ministry in the life of the church.
That's right. No, that's very true. So many of us who work in the church, I find, I was just talking about this with somebody here today. We begin with, a love for the Lord and a desire to do his work in the church and to serve the church, but we don't have really any like administrative skills or business skills or things like that. We kind of come in with this this is not everybody, but it's a lot of us. And then we realize that in order for this to actually happen, you have to have those. So we begin to
Yeah.
learn it as we go on the
Yeah.
job, all the ways that you do as you go, and you become dedicated to it because you realize, even though this is, I always say this to the seminarians when I teach them, when you're going to be a priest, you're going to be able to teach and catechize and counsel and hear confessions and celebrate mass and other sacraments. And it's magnificent. But where you have to do the hard work of administration and governance and hiring and firing and dealing with buildings and leaks and financial budget crises and all of that kind of thing, that's the stuff that's going to make you holy. The other thing makes other people holy. That stuff's going to make you holy. It's going to pull you out of yourself. It's going to take you to places you wouldn't want to go. And that's what it's been for me. And that perspective, which my grandfather originally gave me, that perspective, the things in life that you're required to do that you like the least are the ones that are going to make you the best if you let them to forge you. And so I've tried to do that. I mean, I haven't done it perfectly at all, but it really has made all the difference. And what I've built over those years, when I came here, I was like, wow, I know more than I realized when I suddenly am asked to do things and develop plans and a strategic plan and lead a team through that. So I'm grateful for that history.
Yeah. One of the ways I try to explain that, or at least I've seen it, is that, being able to counsel someone one-on-one is beautiful, right? To hear a confession mass or, sit with somebody who's in need, but
right.
when you're able to manage the administrative, fix the leak in the roof and manage the contract and, do all of that business work, it's like multiplying the effect of that one encounter and supporting it. So it aggregates it, and it makes it, you go to a parish where you're really loved and cared for, and you go to a staff and they're always super responsive and they answer your questions and they are able to solve your problems, and everything is kind of friendly and easy and welcoming. That's because all of that administrative stuff is working the way it's supposed to. All of the background work is happening the way it needs to happen. And it's all, and so what you're seeing sometimes in the church is just the front face of that, but it's really dedicated people who are engaging these efforts to make sure it all runs properly. And I think people who run business know that too. The customer experience is based on the quality of the work that happens behind. So
that's right. And people who are really great leaders, they appreciate all the people who do, as you said, the behind the scenes things that make them look good. Like, I look good because there's 30 people behind me on this team that have done all the grunt work and nobody recognizes what they've done, but I wouldn't look like I do, and it wouldn't be effective the way it is without them. So I think that perspective I've found is a leader's perspective, that if it's not there, you're going to fail if you don't have that appreciation.
Yeah. And I think it's really important for what we're trying to do. I mean, one of the goals, as you know, but one of the goals of the men's conference and men's ministry, all this work that we're trying to do, is a project that's near and dear to you, is a recovery of the lay vocation, a better articulation of it. And a lot of times I think, guys, this is something I keep repeating. Sometimes guys think, if I have a vocation in the church, or God wants me to do something in the church, it means I need to be a speaker, or I need to be a deacon, or I need to be a preacher. And I'm not any of those things. I'm just really good at filing things and keeping stuff in order, or planning something, or doing numbers. I'm a budgeting kind of guy. I push spreadsheets. That's what I'm good at, is spreadsheets. It's like, how is that have anything to do with, my vocation in the church? And, the truth is, you think that because you have a narrow vision of what the work in the church really is. But the truth is, all of those gifts are really necessary.
That's right. No, it's such an excellent point. And, you and I have talked about this, with people like myself years ago, when I had my conversion experience, and we come to the church and we assume pretty easily that, well, the most important thing you can do is the churchy kind of stuff, the things you do at church, the explicitly religious things. Like, what more important thing could there be? And then all of a sudden, all the things of your life that used to be important get sidelined. Now, in some ways, they get sidelined because you had a disordered way of approaching them. You didn't approach the things of the world in a way that was healthy, and so your faith is kind of correcting that. But you can make a confused decision in saying that, well, it's just doing worldly things, the things of the temporal world, professions, jobs, civic life, culture, engaging in those things that are themselves just inferior or tainted inherently, and so it's better to stay away from them and do church things all the time. And not those things, but you lose the fact that for the vast majority of people in the church, the laity, their call is to do the world as God would have them do the world. This is His world. This is the world. Scripture, we think, talks about the world negatively. It does, right? The world it's a place of temptation and it's a place of sin, and it is those things. But that's only one of the meanings in Scripture of it. But the most important meaning is the one in John 3:16, the most quoted Scripture passage of all, which is God so loved the world. He's in love with the world, and He's in love with a broken world. And so when He comes to the world that's broken, He doesn't curse it and throw it aside and say, let me put something better in its place, the church, as if the church is not the world.
Right.
But He says, I'm going to love this world into existence, and it's going to look brutally bloody, which is the crucifixion. That's what it'll look like to love the world, but I'm going to love it back into life. And then I'm going to call all these people as members of my body to go out there and do the same thing as mechanics and lawyers and doctors and nurses and teachers and politicians and all these things. They're going to bring that same vision that I brought into the world into their places. There's an Opus Dei priest that once said to me, he said, I believe that Jesus would have loved to be every profession imaginable, but He couldn't. But He can through us. He can enter into every occupation as members of His body. He can be a mechanic. He can be all those things and do it well with love and justice and prudence and fortitude, charity, all the virtues, with excellence, and show how doing the world and building a civilization on the foundations of justice and charity, how it can be done. And that's what the laity exists for in the church, in the world, to make that a reality as much as they're able to.
Yeah, and the idea that nothing is lost. Benedict the 16th, I repeated this in an earlier comment, I think. Benedict XVI had this idea that we have this idea that if we give ourselves entirely to God, that we'll lose, our identity or something.
That's right.
But the truth is, you don't lose anything. You set those things, you set worldly affairs down. And what ends up happening if the vocation, and some people are called into a monastic vocation, right? Or a radical poverty of a Franciscan or a contemplative order, something like that. I mean, some people, God does ask us to set down things and to follow Him. But what often happens, most of us end up, most of us are lay people, and if we have the courage to set down our, worldly affairs, what ends up is that God asks us to pick Him up again, but renewed and changed. You guys, the story with brother Jude Lasota, good friend of ours from back in the day. And Brother Jude was a businessman who was very successful, and he did a lot of work, and he really wanted to get away from the thing that attracted him to religious life was the poverty and the simplicity, and to set down all of that. And so he becomes a brother, and then they put him in charge of all of the development and making sure all of the brothers get fed, and so he's all of his business skills get picked up again, and that becomes the task for him.
That's true.
But all redeemed now in a new way, and that's part of what we mean by the renewal of the earth that God does through His Spirit, and it's real, and it becomes real practical. It means we have really good plumbers and electricians and mechanics and business leaders and, financial advisors and all of those people who are how good is it to have a mechanic who loves you, right? And who cares about you, and is honest and does good work and, is a craftsman and all of those things. It becomes who doesn't want to live in a city filled with those kind of people?
That's right. No, that's exactly right. And you know what you just said too made me think of in my profession, which is there's a kind of lingo that we use in our church that describes me as a lay ecclesial minister, meaning I'm a lay person who serves in the church in ministry. Ministry usually means the work we do that's oriented towards the church herself, like inwardly toward the church, to serve the church, its life, its structures, its all its activities for the sake of the mission out there. And then what people do outside the church in the world is called apostolate. That's kind of a traditional language distinction, apostolate, which means those who are sent. So people like me who've been kind of set aside to work in the church, I exist for the sake of those who are outside the church in the world, not outside literally the church herself because they're members of the church, but outside the institutional structures of the church in the world. I'm there to serve them. And I had a conversation one time years ago with a professor at FSU, a math professor, and we were having lunch. And he had a kind of coming back to, faith experience. Monsignor Crawford, who was the priest at the time, had really led him back. And we were having lunch and he got teary-eyed and he said, "I wish I could work for God like you do." And I said to him, "I wish I could work for God like you do."
Yeah.
That's the work that ultimately we're called to. Like you're doing the world, man. My job is just to back you up and to strengthen you and encourage you and give you what you need to do what you do. It's the other way around. I said the Catechism says that the ministerial ordained priesthood exists for the service of the baptismal priesthood, which is the laity in the world, not the other way around. Like you don't exist to look at me and say, "You got it made." I get to look at you and say, from a Christian perspective, you got it made because you're out there in the trenches, or as Pius XII said, on the front lines of the battle, bringing the gospel and the kingdom of God into the world. That's where it's at. And I feel privileged to be at the service of those people.
Yeah. Yeah. I really think that's a challenge. I mean, one of the things I want to ask you about is what you see are the challenges of this helping people to understand or being able to really believe that really just the ordinary work that I do is at the service of God as part of the church or whatever. It just really seems like this church world dichotomy thing really makes it very difficult for us to see that when we're changing diapers or paying bills or doing, ordinary, mundane, worldly things,
Yes.
it's somehow not churchy or not religious
Sure.
or not spiritual. And only when we're doing our adoration hour or we have that one little moment where we can connect with God.
Yes.
Like it's so hard for us to hold that idea together, like practically for people. And it's a struggle for me to try to help. I mean, I have it in my head because I have training or whatever, but like really helping that sink into how someone lives their life. Like, what makes that hard, and what are the challenges there, and what can we maybe do to help that?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And it's in so many ways such a challenging one, not just to answer, but to, as you said, even if you have it in your head, to try to get it out there in a way that really changes the way people see the world. Because that's the difference, right? You can have ideas about things, but then the way you see things, like how you naturally see things, it requires a conversion, a transformation over time. It doesn't happen like that. It's not like you just get an idea, light bulb goes off, and you're like, "Oh, now everything looks different. Now I see
I get it now." Right. Yeah.
So a couple of things. First one is it's challenging in our culture because we live in a highly secularized culture, in the sense, meaning secularized there, which secular has lots of meanings to it, but that the idea of God's being present in the world, of the world being inhabited by, right, the spiritual realm, that of the world being a place that speaks the language of God's presence everywhere, which used to be natural in the age of Christendom, as it was called, right? For example, in the medieval period, where the sense that God is present in all things was much more self-evident, but that's not the case anymore. So it's hard in that culture where it's not supported to see your work as imbued with deeply religious meaning, spiritual meaning, transcendent meaning. The world around you doesn't have any of that supported. And then you try to bring that in, and it's really tough because everywhere around you, it says, no, that's not the case. So that's tough itself. So you have to be shaped. This is why, parishes in many ways become places like subcultures where you learn to think this way and to see the world this way, like in a whole different way. So I think that's one thing. Another thing, though, that's challenging, and this is just more kind of self-critical of the church herself in a healthy way, not in an unfair way, but is that the vast majority of our canonized witnesses of what sanctity looks like are clerics, are priests, bishops, deacons, or religious, or lay people who look like religious.
Yeah,
or
who do
clerics.
religious looking thing, who do.
So
yeah.
hard to even recognize a truly secular saint, right? That, in other words, that really lives in the world fully and doesn't somehow withdraw from it like a religious would in some way, in some form. It's hard to find. That's why, for example, the Saint Pier Giorgio Frassati, I think, is an extraordinarily perfect example of what it looks like to be fully immersed in the world, in love with the world, as Jose Maria Escrivá, Saint Jose Maria Escrivá said, the laity should be passionately in love with the world as God is. That was a man who was passionately in love with the world, but utterly realistic as to how broken it was, but didn't lessen his love for it at all. We need canonized witnesses like that. So John Paul II in 1999, just before the new millennium, he said, the new millennium will be the millennium or the age of the laity. And he says the hour of the laity has struck. It will be an age of canonized men and women who live in the ordinary circumstances of the world of daily life, et cetera, right? So he began that by canonizing people like that himself, and his successors have continued that. So I think that's another thing, is to look for the models that show us what that looks like. They're out there. They're absolutely out there. St. Thomas More is one of them. St. Thomas More, right? The Chancellor of England, who was beheaded, a man thoroughly imbued with the world, in love with his position as Chancellor, et cetera, did not want to abdicate it, but he had to for conscience reasons. So you have all kinds of witnesses. So I think that's another thing. And then the third thing, I'll just go ahead.
Okay, go. No, I want you to finish. Go ahead. Go.
So the third thing, just briefly, the third thing is as I said, you can't just change a whole way of seeing the world in a moment. It is to begin to pray in a way that asks God to show you how he's present in everything that you do. There's a beautiful St. Lawrence of the our brother Lawrence of the Resurrection has a book, The Practice of the Presence of God in Everyday Life. Like you constantly recall he's present everywhere. And you think about the fact that Jesus redeemed the world in 33 years of life, and that 30 of those 33 years of life were spent in a manual labor profession, in a family, in a small town. And then the last 3 years we're doing public ministry. 30 years of hiddenness, ordinary work, doing the work of a carpenter in that profession with his father until his father died. And only after that did he begin the public ministry. So that means the vast majority of his life was hidden, ordinary, manual, secular labor that he did, that he redeemed the world by. So that tells you something. So those kind of things, just getting those into your imagination, I think can really help a lot.
Yeah, I was just thinking about, that idea of praying to help you see God in the world. And what that brought to mind, it's saying the same thing, but maybe a little bit differently, is just to help me to see how beautiful the world is, like how good it is. That's like right. Help me to see goodness. I think we're in a time where it's so filled with criticism. It's so filled with this is wrong and this is a problem and this is an issue. And all of that is true. I don't want to be misunderstood that I'm like kind of a Pollyanna optimism that we should have. Like there are issues and there's hard work that needs to be done. And in fact, it's the call of the laity to engage the really difficult issues and problems that are going on.
That's right.
But I can't engage them unless I can love the thing that I'm engaging. Yes. If I'm going to go into politics or something, right? You have to love the state, right? In order to see properly what's wrong with it or what the problem is, and to bring a healing influence to it. And so that prior being able to see the beauty of the things that are around us, the goodness of them.
Yes.
That I think we're just constantly training ourselves to see the problems and the errors, and to just have that deep sight of, what is it about this situation that's good? What is the situation about this that's beautiful? And that's really hard. That's like hard work.
It's very hard work. It's very hard work. And so you have, obviously you have Christ himself who leads the way. And if you think about, and this is a men's conference, and we think about the uniqueness of masculinity. So masculine and feminine genius, right? We have that language in our church. Each one has its own genius. We have a common humanity that we shared together, common, equal before the eyes of God in dignity, but we have a unique way of expressing that. And Christ, who came as a man, right, to lead us forward, shows a particular way of facing the world in its radical brokenness. On every level, he faces the brokenness at the top levels of Roman political society, of the religious society, of Judaism and the Sanhedrin, to the people around him, the soldiers that he meets, to tax collectors, prostitutes. He encounters brokenness everywhere he goes, but he does it in a unique and particular way that we call redemptive. So this is where Christ himself sets the standard, where we don't get Pollyanna, but we never lose hope. I always like to say the difference between a cynic and a Christian is a cynic is a realist without hope. A Christian is a realist with hope. Cynics are great if you want just a raw kind of look at the way things are. And that's fine, but you have to move beyond that to the level of hope. Then what can now be done to bring goodness out of whatever it is that's broken and wrong? How can I, as a friend of mine who's a farmer says, I look at a pile of dung and I think, if I put seeds in there, that dung is going to turn into a luscious kind of explosion of flowers and fruit, etc. I got to know where to find the seeds to turn this into something new. And that's, of course, what the gospel is. So I think that's crucial. And then to have kind of examples of men in the history of the church, canonized men particularly, who have shown the kind of courage and leadership and humility and Christ-like charity in the face of evil and and pain and suffering and resistance and failure and brokenness and addiction and whatever it is. And let those inspire you so you don't, lose hope along the way.
It's interesting too. Like, so there's the problem with finding canonizable lay saints that you're talking about is that they're really hard to find. Like they're in their workshop and they're building furniture, and that's that. Right. Like you don't even you don't see this like outward facing thing. But what came to mind, so I mean I agree with that, but also the work of sanctity is natural to the lay vocation. Like that's what we're all called to. And I think this may be why things like men's ministries, a small men's group and men's ministries in parishes, or like you said, the parish becomes a place where you can learn how to see this way. Like to be able to connect on a deep way with people who are like in arm's reach, like within physical contact of you.
Yes.
And to get to know them and see them, and to be able to see that person is struggling with addiction, that person is struggling with a difficulty at work, that person is, and they're persevering and they're working at it and they're getting better and they're, I end up seeing like these really remarkable examples that are just like within arm's reach of us. If I just go out and touch them. And I think sometimes we forget that. We like look to something far away to be an example to us when examples are right here.
Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the things that we used to do on the posters for the men's conference is we used to put the pictures of all the speakers, right? Come see the speakers, right? And we always have amazing speakers. You're going to be amazing. But we eventually we took them off the poster because we thought, the reason to go isn't to see the speakers, but to see that there are actually really guys that are within reach, that are striving.
There you go.
And you have a actual experience of really seeing the Catholic Church, like really seeing it, doing its thing in the best way that it knows how to do it. It's just all of these guys praying together, all of these guys going to confession together, all of these guys, listening
Yes.
and being encouraged and deciding what to do next in their life, it becomes just a concrete experience of what we can talk about in ways that maybe seem abstract or kind of theological.
That's right. No, that's such an excellent point. That you can't become what you're meant to be alone without people around you to support you, to challenge you, but also to inspire you, like the people you look up to, that you see and you say, that's what I aspire to. Pope Francis, in his apostolic letter that he wrote, which is my favorite of everything he wrote, which is called Gaudete et Exultate, Rejoice and Be Glad, which is basically on the call to holiness for regular people. That's what the whole it's just an exquisite thing, and so few people have read it, which is mind-boggling to me in terms of the church really promoting this. But he has a section in there which he calls the saints next door, that you don't look for the canonized ones, right? In other words, don't just look for those, like you just said. Look for the ones next door. They're all around you, and they're mostly hidden. And that's the way it's supposed to be. Like, most lay people will never be canonized because that's the way it's supposed to be. They all get crammed in November 1st. That's, I always say,
there's plenty of room on November 1st.
That's right. It. The Feast of the Laity is like, and them,
Yeah.
The uncountable, the uncountable cloud of witnesses that Revelation describes are these. And then even the movie, A Hidden Life, which is another story about a layman, Franz Jägerstätter, who's blessed, hopefully saint soon. Franz Jägerstätter, who resisted the kind of Nazis and refused to sign the oath of allegiance to the Nazis. And the movie's called A Hidden Life. And the movie begins with this phrase from George Eliot that says, that most of those who have made it in history so that things are not as bad as they would be otherwise are those whose names will never be known and who are visited in unmarked graves, right? These are the greats of history. The greats of history are just not known. And of course, that's a perfect imitation of God himself, whose providence that does good for all is mostly anonymous and unrecognized and unacknowledged, but it's always at work. And that's the laity. And so that they're not canonized, as you said, is not necessarily wrong. It's just that we have to look for them, as you said, around us.
Yeah, it goes back to a conviction that the world is good.
Yeah.
That it's lovable.
That's right.
Even if it's broken, even when it's, Christ comes into the world to save us from like real problem, but he also comes to the world because he's attracted, like he wants to save us. Like there's something salvageable. There's something worth.
That's right.
There's something worth, not losing. That he, and we have to train ourselves that way too. That we're involved in salvaging what can be salvaged with our, and sometimes the vocational call is, I had somebody call me. Tell me what you think about this. I think this is right. Please. This guy called me and he had a similar question that you had. He's been working in the medical industry. He's been doing fine, but he just doesn't feel like he's doing really God's work. And he's feeling like he wants to, change careers and do something more meaningful, do something more important, and he wants to work in the church or something. And, the first thing was, well, first, don't discount the work that you are doing. Like, that's what we were saying, but also don't discount the possibility that God might be calling you to something else or something more or something different, like make a move. Like, so being able to not throw away what you've done before, but also not be closed off to the possibility of something different. How do you discern that? And I said, well, it's sort of like when your adult kid from college comes home and they're just like in your house and you really can't tell them what to do because they're adults, but you also get annoyed that they're not helping. And, you say, just find something to do, right? Like, look around you. Like, surely you can see there is something that needs doing, and then do that. Like what's, and just start there.
That's right.
Because I found that sometimes, like, I just don't know what to do. I don't know what to do next. It's like, okay, well, what can I start on? And just start, and then that can lead you somewhere different. And I think that's what we're trying to do with the men's conference, is have an experience of the beauty of the church, the goodness of the men in the church, and then hopefully start that like thought, like, okay, for each guy, like what is it that God wants you to do next?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. No, that's I love that. I love that analogy, by the way. That's a great analogy.
Well, it's in my life, Claire, my oldest daughter, Claire, came home from college, over Christmas, and it was like, all right, like you can't just sit there, right?
But I say to my kids, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. It doesn't always go over well, though. But and what I mean by that, kind of humorously, is if this is for children, this is for us. If we're cultivating the desire to serve and please God and trying to be faithful to what we're able to be faithful to in the moment, and then things present themselves to us as things to be done that might be we can do, we're much more apt to recognize them as things that can be done if we've been faithful to the things we've already been asked to be doing and doing it for love of him. So suddenly all kinds of options open up that I never would have thought of, because maybe I'm very selfish and I just don't want to do anything else besides what I absolutely have to do. But then when I kind of fall in love, then all of a sudden, all kinds of things suddenly seem desirable that never were desirable before. And so new pathways open. And I think that's where, for all of us, the most important work that we can do is the interior life, is the working on the self, the growing of love of God in us, the struggling with the vices, right? Bringing them to the Lord and bringing them to others, making myself accountable, developing a prayer life, trying to get more discipline in that, frequenting the sacraments, reading the scriptures, and so on. And then just doing those things in faithfulness as I'm able to, all of a sudden opens up whole kinds of new pathways to us, things we couldn't have seen before until we did those things first. So just starting small, how many stories begin with, I started doing this one little thing, and then that one little thing turned into this thing, into this thing, into this thing. And then all of a sudden we have an entire organization that's built out of this, just because I was faithful in this little thing, and then just let that grow. So I think that, and
it gives us eyes to see.
It gives us eyes to see.
That's and it. The reason to do, my last little pitch for the men's conference, reason to go to the men's conference is we try to make it as visible as we can. We try to get as many of these guys into one room as we can. That's right. Being part of a big number, makes it a little bit easier for us to see. But then also to realize that men's conference is just one day. It's a really small thing compared to the daily that's happening, in a parish, in a men's group, in the interior life of a particular person, as they grow, that thing that, that's what we're not promoting some kind of agenda. We're not trying to institutionalize some kind of ministry or something. We just want to give guys an opportunity to have a little bit new eyes and to move in that direction. And that's what we're trying to do. And we're really looking forward to having you come and be part of that, because I think you'll be able to.
I'm excited. I'm
so excited. We didn't really talk much. We're got to wrap up, but we didn't really talk much about the theme about Mary and Let It Be Done and her receptivity to the will of God. But that is your wheelhouse. So I'll just tell everybody that is your wheelhouse. So really excited about all of that. So Tom, thank you for coming. Chris, such a privilege to have you. Grateful for your friendship, and I just can't wait until you're here.
Same, so much, and I love New Orleans so much. So anytime I get to go back, it's always just such a joy and gift to me. So especially during Mardi Gras season. So thank you.
All right, thanks. Bye.